Okay, I know you see the title and the thumbnail of this video and you're like,
come on.
What is this? Why is this nonsense being recommended to me? And well, let's just take it as your sign to go practice whatever it is you wanted to practice. Because basically in this video, I'm gonna go over why practicing pretty much any skill can be mindful for you and why that matters, because a lot of us just live in this constant state of brain rot where we're not, we're looking for a way to be calm and have something in our daily routine that keeps us calm and relaxed and mindful and aware and whatever else you want to put in there. But why don't we just make our daily activities something that will make us mindful rather than going to look for meditations or mindfulness apps or podcasts or any relaxing sort of, content out there when we could just do the things we do mindfully. So if that sounds interesting to you, that's kind of what the whole point of this series is. So I think you should stay tuned and at least watch the video up until you get bored. Okay, I'm kidding. Please don't hang around until you're bored because you're probably already bored. Maybe just wait until you watch the video and then conclude that I'm insane, then you're fine to leave. But yeah, please hang around. I'd really appreciate it, and I do think it will be helpful for you. So yeah, let's get into it. Okay, welcome to part 5 of Is It Mindful? But yeah, let's get straight into it because I'm going to talk about practicing any sort of skill really, and mindfulness. Now, when I say practice, I'm going to actually switch it to training just for the sake of not confusing anyone, because if I say practice and mindfulness, you're probably going to think of practicing mindfulness, and that's not what I want to say. It's like practicing a skill or training in a sense for whatever it is you do, just to make it easy to understand. But yeah, what is training got to do with mindfulness, and what does mindfulness have to do with training, to be honest? So let's go into it. Okay, so the relationship between training and mindfulness is kind of like a two-way street. So what do I mean by a two-way street? Well, what I mean by this is that practice or training will benefit you to be mindful, but being mindful when you're training will also just help you be better at whatever it is you're trying to do. So they both help each other, and it's not like, oh, one causes the other to be better. It's kind of like a cycle. Okay, just very briefly, so that I don't sound like I'm talking out of my ass, there is a little research behind showing that practicing something can be mindful. And the reasoning behind it is called focused attention. And if you've seen my last video, which most people probably haven't, it's up here. Or up here, one of those sides. But basically it's about focused attention, and focused attention is about being focused on one specific thing. So if you're practicing or if you're training, you're going to be focused on one specific thing. You're attaining that one specific goal or that one specific task or whatever it is that you're trying to get better at. You're going to be focused on it. So it will help you to be mindful via focused attention. But on the other hand, there's research on the other side saying that, hey, if you go into practice or training with a mindful attitude, or if you're mindful when you're going to do it, you're going to be better at attaining the skills that you're going out to practice or to train for. So that shows that. And also, mindfulness is something that was kind of brought up within, I guess, positive psychology. And another thing that's really big in positive psychology is the flow state. And mindfulness is associated with that flow state, and you can just see it in some of the old research that they have. So it's not something to just rule out, and it's not something I'm just talking out of my ass for. And speaking of science, well, there isn't really a lot of research on skill acquisition or skill training or skill practice, and that's because it's very hard to just conceptualize. Like, practicing a skill or training could be anything. Like, it could be from kicking a football or practicing for football, the football where you can only kick the ball with your foot, to drawing. And they're both mindful, and they might have different levels of mindfulness if you were to count it or measure it. But then you also wonder, well, okay, if they're both mindful activities, is it because they're mindful activities, or is it because you're doing the mindful act of practicing something and focusing on something that makes them mindful? And to be honest, this isn't a high priority question for scientists. it's not something the world's gonna go crazy over, and it's also very hard to just conceptualize skill acquisition because it varies for different skills. Some take longer, some take less long, some might be mindful, some might not be mindful, so it's very hard to just measure in general. And with that being said, you know, like, I think it's more important to focus on, okay, well, if I am going to practice something, how do I make it mindful? Or, you know, how do I go in with a mindful mindset so that I actually do what I want to do, but do it better? And how do you get that sort of spiral, I guess that upward spiral, that we'll get into more towards the end of the video. Well then, how do we make our practice mindful? And I mean, if you've seen some of my previous videos, I have made videos on like cooking and gardening, and I guess they're kind of skills that you can build. And so a lot of what I've said in that would also apply here. So I'm not going to go over everything in detail again, but I will give you some quick tips because I do think it's important to know some sort of, I guess, techniques to make sure that you're doing what you're doing properly. And so the first tip that I want to kind of get into is having no distractions.
No distractions!
And why is that important? Well, first of all, because it's focused attention that we're looking for. You need your full focus. Like, that includes music and everything, because you want to be completely focused on whatever it is you're trying to learn. And the reason for that is because, well, you need to be aware of the environment that you practice in so that you know the difference between the practice environment and the performance environment, basically. So let's say you're kicking a football, you're practicing your free kicks, and you know the wind is coming at a certain speed, and there's, I don't know, something making noise around you, and you don't hear that with headphones on or listening to music. So you're kind of out of tune with your environment. And then when you go to perform, it doesn't work as it did when you were training because, well, it's not the same environment obviously, but you haven't adapted to what the difference is between the environments because you weren't even in tune with the environment that you were practicing in. So that was that. But this is also really important for a lot of things that you do online. There's a lot of skills we learn online, especially with coding and technology and everything that we do today. This is especially important to keep in mind when you're doing something online or when you're using any technology like, I don't know, a timer or a clock or an alarm or a stopwatch, especially on your phone or your watch, because they are distractions. So you do need to be aware of those. And this kind of links in with the second tip. And the second tip is to realize what stage of learning something you're at. And what I mean by this is, what are you practicing and how good are you at it? And or at least how knowledgeable are you at it? Because if you're a beginner, you're gonna need help, you're gonna need guidance. You might be using YouTube, you might be using, I don't know, a book, or you might be, you know, getting help from someone else. But as you get better and better, or you get more competent or more knowledgeable, you'll know what you need to practice without having to get help from anyone else. And that makes it mindful because you know what to do and you can do it by yourself and be focused completely. And again, that links in with, you know, not having those distractions, but also just after a certain point, you know, you're gonna have all the knowledge that you need. It's genuinely just about practicing it and practicing it and practicing it.
Do it! Just do it!
And when you do that same thing over and over again, it's gonna be very mindful because, well, you don't need to you're practicing to make it second nature. And when you're doing something that's second nature, you're gonna be very mindful because you don't have to think too much about it. And that way, if you go in with the mindful attitude of like, hey, you know, I know what I want to practice. I don't need a guide. I don't need anything else. I just need myself and my equipment. Hopefully that isn't a distraction. And I can just go do it. And I can think about whatever comes into my mind during the time. I can let it out. Or I can actually focus on whatever I'm doing and get it done with. Okay, and the final tip, it actually comes from one of the papers I was reading, and it talks about like being non-judgmental and not being too emotional about what you're practicing. And this is more so like a mindset to go in with rather than, oh, this is something you need to do in order to be mindful. And basically the mindset of being non-judgmental is obviously good to be mindful because you're just letting everything in and out, and you know, you're just practicing as you're going, and as you get to a certain level of skill, it won't even be about, oh, you know, I can improve on this, I can do that. You'll know what you need to do something better and what you don't need to do or what you need to avoid. to do something better. And then it's just about like literally putting in the reps and keep doing it. And that's where that non-judgmental piece comes in, because if you get annoyed every time, or if you get emotional every time you can't do something in a few goes or something, you're gonna first of all start thinking and tangentially go off and lose your focus and your attention, and you're automatically gonna do worse. But, you know, having sort of that mindset will help your training to be mindful, because when you're non-judgmental, you're like, okay, you know, I did that wrong, cool, I'm gonna just keep doing it. And then you actually notice what it is you're doing wrong. It's like, okay, that didn't work because of this. And being sort of objective about it, and being rather than being subjective about it, is what's gonna make you better, but also is gonna make you more mindful. And that's, you can kind of see how they both kind of feed into each other with that. And they create this sort of upward spiral where, okay, the more and more mindful you get, the better you get at whatever it is you're doing. But even the better you get at whatever you're doing, the chances are you're getting more and more mindful, and they both feed up all the way up to the top until you, I guess, reach peak performance. And I can't speak for that yet, but maybe if there's any professionals or people at the peak of level in any certain skill that are watching this video, unlikely. But if you are, let me know if that's right. And just before I close up on the video, I was thinking of like skills that you could practice that wouldn't be mindful. And it's actually pretty hard to think of any. I couldn't even think of many even so, but if you do think of some, put them down in the comments below. But like most of what I could find were just like skills that, well, you need content. When you're viewing content, it's not mindful. And that's because when we're taking in information, we're not really like thinking about it, unless it's like a class. And like, you know, you have that mindset, in which case, well, yeah, that's mindful too. But like, it's again, just that stage of where you're at. If you're learning something, you know, you might be less mindful. But once you've kind of learned it and you're just practicing it, it's pretty mindful. And like, even with like video games, they can be mindful just because, you know, there aren't really distractions unless you're on your phone on the side. Yes, there's a screen there, but whatever you're practicing is on that screen. Same with coding and typing and making something, because as long as you're not copy and pasting like most coders do, there's a certain level of mindfulness that you can gain from just typing away or whatever it is you're doing, or writing a report, or whatever it is that you're really practicing. And the only real time that one of those skills becomes non-mindful is when you're consuming something on the side, or when you're multitasking, and when you're not just focused on that one thing. So yeah, I do think it applies to most, but I do think there are also exceptions that I just can't think of. So if you happen to think of any, please put them down in the comment section below, because I'm not the smartest person ever, so I won't know everything. I'm not all-knowing. But yeah, that's been this video. Hopefully it's been interesting, which is unlikely, but hopefully it gave you a sense of, I guess, you know, oh, I'm going to practice something. This is what I'm going to do from now on when I'm going to practice, and not really like this is what I'm going to do, but this is the sort of mindset that I'm going to go in with when I go to do it. And if it did, then please leave a like on the video, and I guess subscribe if you want to see related stuff or videos or content. But that's been me for now. Thank you for watching my video and hanging around this far. I doubt anyone's even here. But if you are, thank you, and I will see you in the next one.